Wow, the feels in this episode. Hey everyone, Templar74 here with another video, and today's video is going to be my review on the latest episode of Sword Art Online, Alicization War of Underworld, Episode 11, Heartless Choice. And I gotta be honest with you guys, this episode was very impactful, especially at the end with Liz's speech to her fellow VR MMO players. It just hit you right in the feels. This episode had a lot going on, and the very beginning kinda gave an ominous warning for our Knight Commander and where things are going in the War of the Underworld. I felt that it was really well adapted from the book, in my opinion. And yeah, there's a lot to talk about in this episode. So, at risk of further rambling, let's move on to the actual episode. So the episode begins with our Knight Commander Broccoli and a conversation he was having with none other than Queenella back in the past when Queenella was still alive about premonitions of death. And she asks Broccoli quite frankly, have you ever had premonitions of your own demise or your death? And Broccoli admits that he did when he was younger, but he questions why the Pontifex is asking him this and says, surely you've never had these kind of feelings yourself. And she basically stuns Broccoli by saying, of course I have. I have those premonitions every day, even when I sleep and when I dream, because my enemies are still alive. And it's clear that Broccoli just doesn't understand, what Queenella was talking about, nor can he comprehend why the most powerful person in the human empire would have these premonitions and these thoughts up until now, in the middle of this war and everything that's going on. Broccoli finally understands what Queenella meant. When, as long as your enemies are alive, of course you are going to have premonitions of your own demise. As long as there are people that are going to stand in your way and stand against you, you're always going to have these premonitions. And so it was a very strong moment there, a pretty dark moment, but a strong one there, showing the Knight Commander Broccoli's growth in his hundreds and hundreds of years, rather, I should say, of life here. So big development for our Knight Commander. And as we see Broccoli getting ready to address the new day, we turn to Kirito and his four it's funny. His four companions for the evening. He had Alice and Asuna and Roni and, of course, the lovely Sordelina. And Roni is actually feeding Kirito when we get to this point. And Roni is commenting that Kirito does look better from what he has been. And Alice just kind of smiles at this and makes Asuna blush when she says, well, maybe it had something to do with the fact that he spent the night with four beauties. That joke, of course, lights Asuna up. Kirito, you are the luckiest person on the planet. What can I say? You are the luckiest person on the planet right now. But I digress. That was a very funny moment and a very awkward moment if you were Asuna. But yeah, funny moment nonetheless there with Kirito, and it does look like his condition's improving, although, he's still locked, he's still offline, so to speak. And I do think the fact that he looks a little bit better is more of a tribute to Asuna being there than anything, but again, that could just be me. Although Kirito looks like he's improving, he's still kind of just offline. There's no better way to describe it than he's just offline. So as this is going on, Broccoli sounds the alarm, alerts the girls, everybody reports, and they're troubled by what they're seeing. They're seeing the Puglifts and the Dark Knights crossing these ropes over the ravine that Asuna created. And this is when Broccoli makes a comment. He says, this is very unexpected. These outsiders think outside the box. And he's referring to Dark Emperor Vecta, and he basically tells the knights, unlike Asuna, we are battling. Of course, Broccoli here, he's grateful for Asuna's help, but I find it interesting that he doesn't fail to point out to the Integrity Knights that this is our battle, much like what Alice did in the last episode, that we're going to fight alongside outsiders, but this is our battle, and we need to show what we can do. We are human. So, this is another very interesting nod that Broccoli is he's wanting to be the balancer here. He wants to accept Asuna and the outsiders' help in defeating their common enemy, but at the same time, he's on Alice's side of, we're human and we need to do this ourselves. So Broccoli's really doing a nice balancing act there. And it's also interesting because as they're watching the pug lists and the Dark Knights cross this ravine and fail, we get a little bit of a backstory. Emperor Vecta ordered the pug lists chief to go ahead and order the crossing of the ravine using tight ropes. He doesn't care if there are casualties, and Ishkan is very upset by this. He's upset that they're fighting and dying in vain, not for the glory of the Dark Territory and not for their goal of wanting to conquer the human empire. They're fighting for this so-called Priestess of Light for Dark Vecta, and you can tell that the Dark Territory forces are starting to get irritated with Emperor Vecta, but they're kind of forced to obey him, but they really don't want to fight for this because this is not their goal, and you see them breaking ranks a little bit here as they're struggling internally on whether we should fight for this Emperor Vecta, who's not really fighting for our ideals, or should we fight for what we want and what we believe in. So you see that little bit of dissent even within the Dark Territory as well. But nonetheless, Ishkan carries out the order and has these people cross the ropes and will not tolerate this order being broken, because those are his orders from Vecta. So he's going by the marching orders of Vecta. And as the Dark Territory forces continue to make this futile cross across this ravine here on the ropes, they're really taken aback by the Integrity Knights charging into battle on horseback, and they're really going after these Dark Territory forces that have managed to make it across. And the reason for that is they don't want any more of them to cross that ravine. They don't want to lose their advantage here. And Ishkan is desperately calling out to his people that have made the crossing, do not let them cut the ropes. Do not let them win. And of course, the Integrity Knights charging in on horseback not only mow down these Dark Territory forces that have managed to cross the ravine, they also start slicing the ropes, making Dark Territory forces fall to their demise in the ravine, much to Ishkan's fury. And the cavalry-style battle here with the Integrity Knights was a nice nod to wars in the past, because we haven't seen wars fought like that since World War I, actually. That was the last time we saw great big cavalry charges in battle. So, nice little homage to World War I here with the hoorah of the cavalry going in, and in the backdrop of a trench. You know, it's a nice little homage there to that. So there was that. The cavalry battle was amazingly animated. I really loved it as well, and it really is showing that the cracks within the Dark Territory are beginning to grow as far as dissent with Emperor Vecta. However, while the Dark Territory forces are trying to make this crossing, that's not Vecta's only plan here. And again, another great adaptation from the book. We have Critter's plan on the real world side. In the main control room, he's finally able to get the time synced with the real world. So the time acceleration rate is set to virtually nothing now. Critter's managed to pull this off, unbeknownst to Kikakoa and Higa up in Subcon here. He's managed to pull this off, and that's when we see the big plan from the light novel come in, because he's now sending out this phishing thing for American VR MMO players, basically saying, hey, take part in this free beta test for this new game. You can kill real life humans or real like humans for free. You know, you can come in, this is a real battle here. You can do as much destruction as you want with no penalty, and Americans are jumping on board with this. He's able to instantly recruit an army of 10, 20, 30, possibly even up to 100,000 American players who have no idea what they're about ready to go into, and he's going to transfer all of them to the underworld to bolster the Dark Territory. And so this was another great adaptation from the light novel, in my opinion. However, thankfully, this plan is not completely unnoticed, because Yui within the network has noticed all of these transfers coming in from America into the underworld. She realizes that her mommy and daddy, Kirito and Asuna, are in big trouble, and she needs to get them help. And she rushes to warn Asada and Sugu by using her daddy's phone number, which kind of shocks both Asada and Sugu when they see Kirito's name pop up on their caller ID. But she warns them, you need to get to Wrath and tell Wrath that they need to get a hold of Kikakoa and that they need to warn them what is going on. And so they do. They run to Wrath's headquarters and they alert the ocean turtle of what's going on. And that's when Higa logs in on Subcon and he looks and he realizes the time alteration has changed and he's wondering how they did it. And so, yeah, now the Subcon is up to speed on what's going on thanks to Yui's quick warning to Wrath via Asada and Sugu here. And we actually see these two heading towards the other two STLs at Wrath headquarters. Of course, we know that they're going to make the dive into the underworld here before too long, so that's coming up as well. But then the rest of the episode. The rest of the episode is where the feels really hit, especially Liz's speech, which took up the entirety of the end of the episode. Basically, once Asada and Sugu have raised the alarm to Wrath on what's going on here, we see Yui return to ALO, and there she is surrounded by Liz, Egil, Silka, Klein, and Yui is begging them to please do something to help them. Yui is crying. She's basically saying that all the worlds connected to the seed were intended for the creation of Alice. And she also reiterates what this is. This is a covert battle between the U.S. military and the Japanese military, and whoever wins Alice, the world is going to be drastically changed, because right now Japan's goal with Alice is to be used for demonstration and peaceful purposes, while the American military will turn Alice into an unmanned AI and become a heartless monster, a killing machine. So whoever wins the Battle of the Underworld and wins Alice is going to drastically alter the course of VR MMOs. And it's a really touching speech on Yui's part. And Yui, of course, ultimately convinces everybody there. She convinces Liz, Egil, Silka, and Klein. You know, they didn't need any further convincing, but they pledged that they're going to do everything in their power to help Kirito and Asuna and rescue Alice. And this is much to Yui's excitement. She's overcome by this, and she says thank you. And then they realize what they're going to have to do. And basically, they ask Yui, is there any more super accounts like the one that Asuna's logged in on? And Yui says, yes, they do exist, but there's not nearly enough of them. And they realize what kind of trouble they're in because these Americans are being transferred in mass numbers. And granted, they're low-level accounts. They're not going to have time to level up like Kirito and the others have had. But at the same time, the numbers are just too vast. And they realize that they're going to need an edge. And Yui says there is one. There are multiple accounts that have advanced equipment and more experience in battle than these American default accounts do. They're your guys' accounts, the ones you're logged in as. And it's at this time they realize, hey, wait a minute. If the Americans can transfer into the underworld via the seed network, why can't we? And they are bound determined that they're going to raise a force of their own to go into the underworld to back up the Human Guardian Army here. But there's a problem. The episode is just plagued with problems. But this problem is a much more serious one. It's time. You can't fight the clock, and you can't fight the calendar. They're terrible masters here, and it's proving true in this episode as well. And basically what it is, it comes down to the clock. The Americans that are coming in, the Americans that have gotten this message en masse, it is 3:30 noon in America, while in Japan it's only 4 a.m. So even if we got a message out for this beta test and transferred Japanese players in via Wrath into the underworld, there wouldn't be nearly enough people online to make a difference. They wouldn't be able to raise enough people to conquer 10,000 Americans. There's just no way. The Americans have the numbers advantage here, and they have the clock advantage here. And that's when they realize, hey, we got fellow VR MMOs players here in Japan. Let's get them gathered in ALO. And this is where we see the big convenience of ALO players in the Great Hall there. the neutral hall, and this is where Elizabeth's speech pours in. And this is probably the most feel of the episode, the biggest feel moment of the episode, rather. And that's when she's begging these ALO players to please dive into the underworld, risk everything, to go in and save Alice. She's pleading with these players that Alice is not just an AI, she's a human. All these people in the underworld, they're human. You can't let them die. You can't let them be massacred by Americans. And there's virtually no takers, because the low-ranking ALO players are angry. They think that this is just about SAO survivors, blurring the line between reality and games. And although there are the leaders of ALO, and they're real quiet, they're not saying anything. And finally, one of them speaks up. She says, I believe that you wouldn't have gathered us here, Liz, if there wasn't an urgent crisis, if this wasn't a real problem. Same time, they're having a hard time believing that this is a covert battle between the Japanese and American military. Moreover, they're having a hard time believing the whole Alice and the underworld humans being human. And basically, they want to know what these risks that Liz mentioned earlier are. And Liz explains to them point blank, if you go into this game, you cannot log out unless you die in game. And if you die in game, you lose the character that you have worked so hard for. And the lower level ALO players go nuts over this. They start screaming at Liz, accuse her of being just an SAO survivor who's out for glory, wanting to be a hero, a show-off, and they're throwing all kinds of slurs at Liz and them, accusing the SAO survivors of blurring the line between reality and games, and it's too much. Liz just realizes she's failed, and then she decides to fire back, and she gives the most passionate rebuttal I've ever seen in SAO. And that's when she said, yes, we SAO survivors have been accused of blurring the line between reality and VR MMOs, but we go through struggles as well. We have to go to mandated counseling. We're locked in a school of only SAO survivors. We are on potential criminal watch lists. She goes on and informs these players of just what the SAO survivors are going through, and most of them have no idea the struggle that the SAO survivors have in reality. And it's this speech and this plea that Liz gives that closes out the episode. We don't see the reaction that we get in the light novel just yet in this episode. I suspect we'll see that next week, but it was a very strong, passionate way to close the episode, in my opinion. Liz's speech really hit the feels. I was actually crying a little bit when the episode concluded and we saw that speech from Liz there, and it'll be very interesting to see how her words react to the other characters in anime. We know how it reacts in the light novel, but we haven't seen that yet in anime. But yeah, this episode overall was a great adaptation from the light novel, in my opinion. I really enjoyed how they did it. It was well animated. It was beautifully animated when it came to the cavalry battle in the underworld. And it's really showing just how far Alicization and Alicization War of the Underworld is going with the SAO franchise here. And I really think that they are setting the bar every time a new arc comes out in this series of just how close and how well they can mate it to the light novel. And it shows that when they do it, it can be an epic series, in my opinion. Overall, I loved the episode, though. I give it a 9.5 out of 10. It was almost a perfect episode. Almost. There were a couple of things that, animation glitches and things like that. Nothing worthy of noting, but the focus of the episode, the premission of the episode, everything was spot on, in my opinion. I loved the episode, but as always, in the comment section down below, let me know what your guys' thoughts were about this week's episode. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you think it was just there? What was your favorite part? Just let me know in the comment section down below, because as always, I enjoy hearing from you. Alright everyone, as always, Templar74 signing off. Have a great day everybody, and I'll talk to you all next time. Goodbye everybody.